Hi, it's Katrina. Ever wondered what secrets the desert is hiding? It seems like it's all just sand and scorpions, but we know better than that. Beneath the surface lie some seriously mind-blowing discoveries. Imagine ancient cities swallowed by time, revolutionary tech buried for centuries, and treasures that could change history books forever. Get some water and let's go. The city of Hegra. I'm sure you've heard of Petra, the magical city carved into the cliffs in Jordan. But did you know there are more places like this? Prepare to be amazed by Hegra, its equally stunning yet lesser-known sister, hidden deep within the Saudi Arabian desert. This ancient city is a testament to the ingenuity of the Nabatean civilization. It was so well hidden it remained a secret for centuries. English traveler Charles Montagu Doughty traveled to Saudi Arabia in the 1800s in search of the city shortly after Petra was rediscovered in 1812. He heard whispers of a similar site nearby and wanted to be the first to find it. For years, he searched the desert with no luck. It was only when he joined a local caravan party that he finally discovered the ruins of Hegra in 1876. Imagine the feeling of finally finding a lost city hidden in the cliffs after years of searching in very harsh conditions. The site was really impressive, but the true extent of it wasn't revealed for 130 years, when real excavations began. Researchers essentially ignored this ancient city for over a century. Why? I don't know. Maybe because it was so hard to get to. Hegra may have been hidden beneath the sands, abandoned and forgotten for over 2,000 years, but in the 1st century AD, Hegra was a bustling hub for trade. This desert metropolis thrived under the Nabatean civilization, a mysterious group of desert nomads turned master merchants. However, when the Romans annexed their kingdom in 106 AD, Hegra's glory began to fade. By the time the city was left to the mercy of the scorching sun, it had transformed into a near-perfect time capsule. Lucky for us! Hegra was the Nabatean kingdom's second major city after Petra. It's located at the base of the Hejaz Mountains, about 684 miles from Saudi Arabia's modern capital, Riyadh. The site features 111 tombs, each intricately carved into sandstone cliffs, as well as 130 ancient wells. But while Petra has become a household name, Hegra remained relatively unknown. The Nabateans were masters of the desert. They somehow were able to bend the desert to their will and created trade routes, controlling the flow of valuable goods like frankincense, myrrh, and spices. Their trade network extended across modern-day Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and beyond. They became extremely rich and built cities like Petra and Hegra, developing advanced systems for surviving the harsh desert environment. This included sophisticated water management techniques like natural pipes to protect their buildings. Do you think you could live in the desert? Vegas is enough of a desert for me. We know that the Nabateans were quite advanced for their time, but unfortunately, that's about all we know about them. Unlike civilizations like the Greeks or Mesopotamians, the Nabateans didn't leave behind any written records. Most of what we know comes from outsiders like the Greeks and the Romans, who were amazed at their wealth and ingenuity. That's why they wanted to take them over. Many of the tombs here feature inscriptions, and there are even some curses written on a few. These texts name the tomb's owners and even specify inheritance rules, showing that women in Nabatean society had legal rights. Inside the tombs, archaeologists have found well-preserved artifacts like coins, glass beads, bronze bracelets, and embroidered fabrics. So why was Hegra forgotten for so long? Some historians suggest that the Nabateans were overshadowed by the Roman Empire, which took over their lands and culture and their wealth, of course. That was the whole point. The lost city of Hegra leaves us with more questions than answers. Like, how did these desert merchants stand against mighty empires? What did they believe in? And how did they thrive in such an unforgiving environment? Would you have liked to live here? Let me know in the comments. The flying saucer wreck. Picture the NASA control room filled with scientists gripped by anxious anticipation. They're watching something fall to the Earth. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's a UFO. Wait, no, is that thing ours? Is that a NASA spacecraft? In 2004, news channels erupted in a frenzy of speculation, with headlines screaming alien invasion and and social media ablaze with theories. There were reports that a flying saucer had crash-landed in the Utah desert, but the object hurtling towards Earth wasn't an alien ship at all. It was the Genesis spacecraft, a NASA mission launched in 2001 with an audacious goal: to catch pieces of the solar wind, tiny particles streaming from the sun, and bring them back to Earth. Isn't it amazing that we can do things like that? Scientists wanted to study these particles to better understand the sun's makeup and how the solar system formed. Think of it as catching cosmic dust with a high-tech butterfly net. For 2 years, the spacecraft orbited a sweet spot in space called Lagrange Point 1. It used special collector panels made of materials like sapphire, silicon, and even gold to trap the solar wind. In September 2004, the Genesis return capsule, carrying precious solar samples, was hurtling towards Earth. The plan? Deploy parachutes mid-descent so that helicopters could grab it mid-air, James Bond style, and whisk it away to a clean lab. What could go wrong? A tense silence gripped the control room as the capsule descended towards Earth. Then silence. The expected signal indicating parachute deployment never came. The parachutes didn't deploy. Why? Some tiny sensors inside the capsule, which were about the size of a pencil tip, had been installed backward. Yep, this was a small mistake with massive consequences. I'm almost positive someone got fired for that. Without the parachutes, the capsule slammed into the Utah desert at a bone-jarring 193 miles per hour. To anyone paying attention, this definitely would have looked like a flying saucer crashing to Earth. When scientists rushed to recover it, the capsule was partially buried and the solar wind samples were contaminated with dirt. You would think that would spell the end of the mission, but NASA doesn't give up that easily. They carefully cleaned the remaining samples, salvaging enough data to publish groundbreaking findings within a few years. The mission revealed new details about the sun's composition and how it's different from planets, raising fresh questions about how the solar system formed. So, was the Genesis mission a failure? Hardly. However, it was a big letdown for locals, thinking that tiny green men had just crashed into their backyard. They were pretty excited. The capsule's landing was more crash and burn than smooth touchdown, but it still delivered crucial information. Ancient Yakchals. Have you ever thought about how miserable it must have been for ancient civilizations living in the desert? I mean, how did they survive in that unbearable heat? The truth is, this wasn't as much of an issue for them as you might think. Persian engineers solved this problem 2,400 years ago. So, how did they do it? By building yakchals. These were massive ice pits that acted like refrigerators, keeping water and food cool even during the most brutal heat waves. A yakchal wasn't just a hole in the ground, it was a technological masterpiece. Picture a giant domed structure rising out of the sand. Beneath it was a deep, square-shaped storage area where ice and food were kept cool. But here's the genius part. The Persians used a special kind of mortar called sarouj, made of clay, sand, goat hair, ash, and lime. This stuff was so waterproof and insulating that it could keep out the heat, even when the desert sun was doing its worst. Water filled these yakchals from nearby mountains or through underground channels called qanats. These qanats were like secret subterranean rivers, guiding water straight into the ice pits. And what made them even cooler, literally, was that many yakchals had devices that funneled cool air into the dome while pushing warm air out, creating a natural air conditioning system. It was basically an ancient HVAC, no electricity required. How incredible is that? Remember, this was thousands of years ago. These ice pits also made ice, even that long ago. During cold nights, water inside the yakchal would freeze, especially if chunks of mountain ice were already stored there to kickstart the process. By morning, the ice was ready to be cut into blocks and used for drinking and cooling food, just like a refrigerator. And fun fact, the Persians even built walls next to the yakchals to shade the incoming water from the blazing sun. They really thought of everything. Yakchals weren't just a luxury, they were a lifeline. In a time when refrigeration didn't exist, keeping food fresh and water cool was a matter of survival. And these ice pits weren't limited to one region. Similar structures popped up across Iran, Afghanistan, and other parts of Central Asia. Amazingly, many yakshals are still standing today. Structures that were built over 2 millennia ago have survived the test of time. Not only do they show how clever ancient Persian engineers were, but they also give us ideas for sustainable practices in the future. Modern researchers suggest that yakshals could be a game changer for regions with similar climates, like the American Southwest or parts of China. Could you see yourself building a yakshal in your backyard? Who knows? It might save your life one day. If you want to learn more about ancient technology, be sure to subscribe to the channel and check out some of our other videos. The mysterious Marree Man. Imagine flying over Australia's outback and looking down to find a ginormous picture of a hunter wielding a boomerang etched into the desert floor. You might think your eyes are playing tricks on you, but this is exactly what happened to a pilot named Trey Smith in 1998. The giant earthworks stuck out like a sore thumb against a backdrop of red soil. But how did it get there? Who created it and why? The geoglyph, called the Marree Man, isn't just big, it's massive. It stretches 2 miles long with a 17-mile perimeter and was carved with precision that seems impossible for something made in secret. The lines are 12 inches deep and 115 feet wide, showing a figure complete with a boomerang, scars, a headband, and, well, a prominent phallus. Who could have orchestrated such a massive undertaking without leaving a trace? You would think that this thing would be ancient, like the famous Nazca lines of Peru, but spoiler alert, it's not. Satellite images confirmed that the Marree Man appeared between May 27th and June 5th, 1998. By June 26th of that year, it was already baffling pilots flying over the area. Creating such a perfect design would have required heavy machinery, GPS technology, and a lot of time, or so you'd think. But no one reported seeing or hearing anything suspicious. What's even more bizarre is that the only clues about its origins came in the form of cryptic faxes sent to local hotels and media. These messages promoted the figure as a tourist attraction, but their wording seems odd. Why? Well, they used American phrases like state government and measured the figure in miles instead of kilometers, the form of measurement used in Australia. So, could an American have created this Australian marvel? Strange objects were found near the site, further adding to the mystery. A plaque featuring the US flag and Olympic rings, and a glass jar containing an aerial photo of the glyph were also discovered. What is going on here? Was this an elaborate prank, a cultural tribute, or something else entirely? Some even wondered if Aboriginal groups had created it to honor their heritage, but local communities dismissed this. They called the glyph disrespectful to sacred lands. One popular theory points to Bardius Goldberg, an artist from Alice Springs who was passionate about Aboriginal culture. Rumor has it he received $10,000 for a project, which could explain how he funded the Marree Man. On his deathbed, Goldberg allegedly admitted to creating the geoglyph. But if that's true, why didn't he claim credit earlier? Was he afraid of legal trouble? And how did he pull it off without anyone noticing? After all, carving such a massive figure required machinery and coordination, but no witnesses ever came forward. Even after locals restored the fading lines in 2016, the Marree Man remains a mystery. Goldberg may be the best lead, but there are still a lot of unanswered questions. What do you think? Crazy art project or cultural tribute? Desert glass. Could ancient civilizations have possessed nuclear power? It sounds like a wild conspiracy theory, but strange discoveries of desert glass and ancient ruins might just change what we thought we knew about the past. Let me start by telling you about J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb. After the first nuclear test in New Mexico in 1945, a student of his asked if this was the first test ever conducted. His reply, "Yes, in modern times." What? Oppenheimer studied ancient Hindu texts like the Bhagavad Gita, which describes apocalyptic events involving weapons of great destruction. Could he have been hinting that ancient civilizations knew about nuclear power? Fast forward to 1932, when Patrick Clayton, a surveyor in the Egyptian desert, stumbled upon something bizarre: massive chunks of yellow-green glass scattered across the sand. This wasn't your average glass. It was pure, almost 99% silica, and it looked eerily similar to the fused glass left behind by modern nuclear explosions. Scientists discovered similar glass in other deserts like the Mojave in the United States and the Sahara. But get this, there were no impact craters. Meteorite strikes were the obvious explanation, but without craters, that theory falls apart. Plus, the heat required to create this glass, over 3,300 degrees Fahrenheit, was way beyond natural events like wildfires. One theory suggests that a meteor exploded in the air, much like the Tunguska event in Siberia. However, this doesn't explain the purity of the glass or why some areas, like parts of the Libyan desert, show repeated patterns of glass formations. Were these spots testing grounds for something not of this earth? In Mohenjo-Daro, an ancient city in modern-day Pakistan, archaeologists unearthed ruins with fused rocks and crystallized surfaces, which are signs of extreme heat. Scattered skeletons were also found lying face down in the streets. Creepy. And guess what? They showed radiation levels that scientists can't explain. Ancient texts from the region describe flying vehicles or vimanas saving thousands from a catastrophic event. Could this city have been a victim of nuclear warfare thousands of years ago? Mohenjo-Daro isn't the only mystery. Similar heat-blasted ruins have been found in Scotland, Turkey, India, and even Ecuador. How is it that so many ancient sites could show signs of destruction by heat so intense it rivals modern nuclear explosions? The idea of ancient nuclear war might sound insane, but the evidence, desert glass, fused ruins, and mysterious texts, keeps us guessing. Did ancient civilizations develop and then destroy themselves with technology we only recently discovered? Let me know what you think in the comments. And now for a quick break, but first, I want to give a big shout out and a thank you to Jennifer Lingscore and Debbie for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. Opal-covered dinosaur bones. Did you know that dinosaur bones can become encrusted in precious gems? Now that's pretty cool. 3 decades ago, a frustrated opal farmer named Bob Foster ended up making one of the most incredible finds in the world of archaeology. In the dusty town of Lightning Ridge in outback Australia, Foster and his family toiled underground for hours searching for opals, the rainbow-hued gems the region is famous for. But instead of precious stones, Foster kept finding dinosaur bones. Foster soon realized that these weren't ordinary dino bones. They started piling up in his living room like a prehistoric jigsaw puzzle. He was curious, so he stuffed the bones into 2 suitcases and took a 450-mile train ride to the Australian Museum in Sydney. There, he dumped them onto the curator Alex Ritchie's desk. To Foster, they were curiosities. To Ritchie, they were a gold mine. Or perhaps an opal mine. An excavation team soon set out for the site, which was nicknamed the Sheepyard. Their efforts paid off in 1984 when they uncovered something extraordinary: the most complete dinosaur skeleton ever found in New South Wales. Not just any skeleton, though. These bones glittered with opal, like prehistoric jewels. The fossils were displayed at the Australian Museum, dazzling visitors for years before Foster donated them to the Australian Opal Centre in Lightning Ridge. For decades, no one formally studied the fossils, but in 2019, researchers finally took a closer look. What they uncovered was nothing short of groundbreaking. The fossils belonged to a newly identified dinosaur species named Fostoria dimbangunmal. The name honors Foster and means sheepyard in local indigenous languages. The species belonged to a group of plant-eating dinosaurs with kangaroo-like builds and horse-shaped skulls. While Fostoria wasn't flashy in life, its opalized remains make it a superstar in death. But the story gets even more interesting. When paleontologist Phil Bell examined the fossils, He assumed they all came from one dinosaur, but something didn't add up. Why were there 4 shoulder blades of different sizes? CT scans revealed the truth. The bones came from 4 individuals, an adult and 3 juveniles. This hinted at something remarkable. Fostoria dinosaurs traveled in herds or family groups, likely for protection against predators. Before this discovery, Australia had little fossil evidence of dinosaur herds. So, finding these opalized remains added a dazzling chapter to the continent's prehistoric story. What do you think? Could opal-covered dinosaur bone jewelry be a new craze in the future? I kind of want some. Hydraulic lift technology in Egypt. Here's a tricky question. How are the pyramids in Egypt built? Specifically, the Pyramid of Djoser. It's a difficult question even for archaeologists, many of whom have different ideas. Did they use slave labor, ramps and pulleys, acoustic levitation, or did they use advanced technology, perhaps hydraulic lifts? Listen to this and let me know your thoughts in the comments. The Pyramid of Djoser, standing proudly on the Sahara Plateau, dates back to around 2680 BC, making it Egypt's oldest pyramid. Built for the pharaoh Djoser during the Old Kingdom's 3rd dynasty, this 200-foot-tall structure is more than just a massive pile of limestone. It was part of a sacred complex west of the Nile, surrounded by temples and mysterious enclosures. So where did the theory about hydraulic lifts come from? A team of French researchers, led by Xavier Landreau, thinks the Egyptians built an intricate water management system to help build the pyramid. Using satellite imagery and archaeological reports, they found evidence of a possible hydraulic lift system. Imagine heavy limestone blocks floating on rafts inside water-filled shafts. As the water level rose, the stones could have been lifted straight up to their final resting place. It's like ancient Egypt's version of a freight elevator. But where did all this water come from? The team's research pointed to an ancient stream called the Abusir Wadi, which flowed near the site thousands of years ago. They discovered a massive stone enclosure built before the pyramid itself. For years, archaeologists thought this structure was a cattle pen or a fortress, but the French team believes it was actually a check dam. This clever design would have controlled flooding and stored water for use in the pyramid's construction. The Sahara Plateau was much wetter 4,700 years ago. The Sahara hadn't fully dried up yet, and seasonal floods from the Abusir Wadi could have provided plenty of water for a hydraulic system. The researchers also found compartments around the pyramid that may have purified water before sending it into the shafts. But before we can say case closed, the team admits more research is needed. They want to study how water might have flowed through the shafts and if the Abusir Wadi really had enough water to power this ancient elevator system. But even without all of the answers, this theory makes you wonder, were the Egyptians even more advanced than we thought? What do you think? Did the builders of the Pyramid of Djoser really harness the power of water to lift massive stones? If so, they might have been ancient geniuses who figured out hydraulic engineering thousands of years before modern technology. Giant camel sculptures. What in the world are giant, lifelike camel carvings doing in the Saudi Arabian desert? Archaeologists discovered these sculptures in 2018 in Al Jaf province. At first, they thought the carvings were about 2,000 years old, based on their resemblance to other rock art in the region. But a recent mind-blowing revelation showed that they are actually between 7,000 and 8,000 years old, making them the oldest three-dimensional animal sculptures in the world. That's right, they are older than the pyramids or Stonehenge. The carvings are no ordinary rock doodles. These camels, along with a few horses or horse-like creatures, were sculpted directly into rock formations, creating a three-dimensional effect. At one point, they must have looked like they were stepping out of the stone itself. They weren't just scratched onto the surface either. Some of the figures were carved at heights requiring scaffolding. The precision and realism, even in their now eroded state, are stunning. So how is it that during a time when tools were supposedly just rocks, ancient people managed to carve these life-sized camels? Some of the camels even show unique details like bulging necks or pregnant bellies. What this means is that they may have been connected to fertility in some way or rituals. The site seems to have been a gathering spot for ancient communities who might have come together to exchange goods, stories, or even spouses. Think of it as a Neolithic version of a town square. You may be wondering, how did archaeologists figure out the true age of these carvings? And that's where science gets interesting. At first, researchers guessed the age by comparing these sculptures to other carvings nearby. But closer inspection revealed that the sculptures weren't made with metal tools as previously thought. Nope, they were made with stone ones. And to researchers, that screamed Neolithic era. Advanced techniques like analyzing erosion patterns and geological layers sealed the deal. This wasn't just some dusty guesswork, it was detective-level archaeology. Today, this region is an arid desert, but 7,000 years ago, it was a lush savanna teeming with life. It was full of lakes, grasslands, and lots of wildlife, including camels. The people living here were herders, hunters, and gatherers who likely viewed their environment as sacred. They built incredible structures like massive stone rectangles called mustatils, which are believed to be ritual sites for animal sacrifices. And with over 1,000 of these structures scattered across the desert, this area wasn't just a random spot. It was a cultural and spiritual hub. The creators of these camel sculptures didn't leave written records, so archaeologists are piecing together their lives through art and structures. It's clear they were skilled, organized, and deeply connected to their environment. The effort to create these carvings, combined with the massive scale of the mustatils, shows that these communities weren't just surviving, they were thriving. And because they were doing so well, they were able to express complex beliefs about the world around them. Lac de Gafsa. If you ever visit Tunisia, stay away from a lake known as the Lac de Gafsa. Why? Because it's radioactive. In August 2014, something extraordinary happened in the Tunisian desert. Mehdi Bilal, who was returning home from a wedding, stumbled across what seemed like an impossible sight. What he found was a vast, shimmering lake where days earlier there had been nothing but sand and rock. At first, Mehdi thought the heat had cooked his brain. Was this a mirage or maybe magic? He wasn't sure. But as he stood on its shores, the reality of the Lac de Gafsa, the lake that appeared out of nowhere, became undeniable. Word of this desert miracle spread like wildfire. Soon, hundreds of people from nearby villages swarmed to the lake, which they nicknamed Gafsa Beach. With summer temperatures soaring to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, the cool water seemed like a dream come true. But how did this lake appear? Some suspected seismic activity had fractured the rocks, causing underground water to surge to the surface. Others theorized it could simply be rainwater filling a canyon. Either way, the lake was massive, covering about 2.5 acres and plunging 33 to 59 feet deep. But sometimes miracles have a dark side. The region around Gafsa is rich in phosphates, minerals used in fertilizers and even chemical weapons. While this may sound cool, phosphate mining leaves behind dangerous radioactive residue. In fact, local geologists quickly suspected that the water might be contaminated, making it not just refreshing, but potentially radioactive and carcinogenic. Double yikes. And then there was the algae problem. Within days, the lake's once crystal blue water turned murky green as algae bloomed, indicating that the water had become stagnant and full of bacteria. Not exactly the paradise it first appeared to be. Despite these warnings, though, locals couldn't resist the lake. Diving from rocks, splashing around, and cooling off in the blistering heat seemed to outweigh fears of contamination or disease. Authorities, including Gafsa's Public Safety Office, issued warnings, urging people to avoid swimming until the water could be tested. But official updates were sparse, and the swimmers just kept swimming. The origins of the lake remain a mystery to this day. Is it a blessing, offering relief in the desert, or a curse, luring people into radioactive waters? Would you dare to take a dip? The Lost Desert Cities of Dubai. Peel back the layers of luxury in Dubai and you'll find a past woven from bronze, iron, and daring sea voyages. Dubai might be known today for its glittering skyscrapers and luxury, but its deserts hold secrets that tell a completely different story. Hidden beneath the sands are the ruins of ancient cities that reveal how people in this region thrived long before the modern skyline existed. Over 5,000 years ago, in the Hegra Mountains east of Dubai, early settlers discovered something game-changing: copper. This led to the creation of bronze, a mix of copper and tin, which revolutionized tools, weapons, and farming. The region became known as the Land of Magan, supplying bronze to ancient Sumerian cities like Ur and Uruk. Back then, Dubai wasn't a tourist hotspot, it was the backbone of an ancient industry. One key site is Hili, near the modern city of Al Ain. Here, archaeologists uncovered a 4,700-year-old circular tomb with carvings of oryx, large antelopes with long, spear-like horns above the entrance. The precision of the stonework is so impressive that it's been compared to the Inca walls of Machu Picchu, though it predates them by millennia. Jump ahead 2,000 years, and iron replaced bronze as the must-have material. And that's when Mleha, a bustling city at the edge of the desert, rose to prominence. Around the time of Christ, Mleha was a hub of iron production, complete with a massive fortified foundry. This wasn't just any desert town, it was a center for crafting weapons, coins, and iron goods that were traded as far as Mesopotamia. But like many ancient cities, Mleha was eventually abandoned, its walls swallowed by the desert sands. Another remarkable site is Julfar, a medieval port city north of modern Dubai. Julfar thrived for over 1,000 years as a trading hub, connecting the Arabian Gulf to places as far away as India and China. During the Golden Age, from the 10th to the 14th centuries, Julfar's merchants were the ultimate globetrotters, undertaking epic 18-month sea voyages. This city also has a dash of legend. It's said to be the home of Ahmed ibn Majid, the famous navigator, and possibly the fictional Sinbad the Sailor. Over time, Julfar fell to invaders like the Portuguese and the Persians, and by the 18th century, it was abandoned. What's incredible is that these ancient sites, Hili, Mleha, Julfar, and others, are still being explored to this day. Archaeologists uncover new artifacts every year, piecing together the fascinating history of the United Arab Emirates. So next time you think of Dubai as just a modern marvel, remember that beneath the desert are ancient secrets waiting to be discovered. The high-tech metal furnace. Who knew a desert workshop could hold so much magic? Ancient metallurgists were basically magicians. No, they wouldn't entertain you at a party, but they would create things that you would never dare try to make. Long before Iron Man, but maybe just as cool, ancient metallurgists were cooking up some serious tech in the form of advanced copper furnaces around 6,500 years ago. The story kicked off in 2017 when archaeologists uncovered the remains of a copper smelting workshop in the Negev desert. If you're picturing a fire pit, think again. These furnaces were like the high-tech gadgets of their time. Unlike smaller, portable crucibles used earlier, these industrial furnaces allowed for more efficient copper production, giving rise to a whole new level of craftsmanship. Professor Erez Ben Yosef from Tel Aviv University is the one who said that these metalworkers were like magicians, mastering complex techniques to turn raw copper ore into pure ingots and ceremonial artifacts. These metallurgical wizards weren't just craftsmen, they were part of an elite class operating in tight-knit, guild-like groups. Their methods were kept secret, much like the alchemists of medieval Europe. They jealously guarded their recipes for turning base metals into gold, or at least trying to. To uncover their secrets, researchers analyzed fragments of furnaces, slag, the leftover stuff from smelting, and crucibles. Each workshop had its own secret recipe, creating fierce competition among them. We already know what some of these ancient artifacts looked like. Back in 1960, archaeologists stumbled upon the Nahal Mishmar Cave of Treasures in the Judean desert, and they unearthed around 400 copper objects. Many of these likely came from these very furnaces in Beersheba. Thanks for watching! Which discovery from the desert did you find the most fascinating? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know what you'd like to hear more about!
Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. The fearsome marine predator. Scientists in Chile recently discovered the remains of one of the largest marine predators this world has ever seen. Bones of the prehistoric monster were found in the middle of one of the driest places on Earth. The fossilized creature was dug out of the sand of the Atacama Desert, a barren wasteland of dirt and stone. Even though the desert is currently an inhospitable nightmare, it was once at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. And for that reason, scientists have been able to discover the remains of lots of ancient ocean reptiles. This specific extinct reptile was a pliosaur, something with an even more powerful bite than the famous T-Rex. The pliosaur inhabited this part of the ocean 160 million years ago. Archaeologists found the remains of its jaw, a piece of tooth, and several limb fragments. Rodrigo Otero with the University of Chile says the pliosaur was very similar to modern killer whales. They had large skulls, huge teeth for ripping apart victims, and limbs that acted like fins. He also added that the desert is a hotbed of fossils, with thousands, maybe even millions of animal remains hidden deep under the surface. Marree Castle. Marree Castle can be found in a dusty desert about 1,800 feet above sea level. It stands in northwestern Saudi Arabia, in the old and forgotten town of Dumat al-Jandal. It's one of the most important historical sites in the area, looking like a giant sand castle the tide forgot to wash away. It really does look like it was sculpted by a child with a bucket and a whole lot of beach sand. But of course, Marree Castle wasn't built by a kid at the beach. It was likely constructed around the 3rd century AD, right before the invasion of Zenobia, queen of Palmyra. Historical records show that Dumat al-Jandal rebelled about 1,700 years ago, and Zenobia came to squash the rebellion, only to find herself stuck outside the walls of the massive castle and its fortifications. This was not great news for the queen, who had already brought a huge amount of the Roman East under her control. She even annexed Egypt in 270 and had taken control of Anatolia in 271. The issue was that taking control of so many areas typically resulted in pockets of rebellion. And here at the Marree Castle, the rebels had a fortification the queen just couldn't seem to break. In the end, the queen had bigger fish to fry. She declared her son the emperor in 272, only to be swiftly defeated by the Romans. She was captured, sent to Rome as a prisoner, and stayed there the rest of her life. The Marree Castle remained an important desert outpost during the emergence of Islam in the 7th century, but was gradually abandoned until it became a ruin. Would you travel through the desert to see the castle? Let me know in the comments. And now for number 8. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a huge thank you to David Bratcher for supporting this channel. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for more videos like these. Somalian meteorite crash. Scientists recently discovered a pair of minerals completely new to our planet. These two minerals were never found on Earth before, and came from a meteorite that crash-landed in the desert of Somalia. The meteorite was found near the town of El Ali, and it's positively massive. This thing is almost 7 feet long, just shy of 4.5 feet tall, and 3.3 feet wide. It also weighs an astounding 16.8 tons, or about 33,000 pounds. This puts it in the top 10 for largest fallen things ever found on the planet. It's believed the meteorite is very old, seeing as such a thing bursting through the atmosphere would have undoubtedly caught someone's attention. It would have hit the ground with the force of a bomb, so scientists think it must be extremely old. It was only dug out of the ground because a mining company had prospectors digging for rare minerals. A small chunk of the meteorite was recently sent to the University of Alberta. There, researchers began looking at the composition of the rock. That was when they uncovered unknown minerals. Scientists with the University of Alberta's Electron Microbe Laboratory identified 2 minerals that had never been seen in nature before. Chris Hurd, one of the scientists involved in the study, said he was floored by what they found. There are only about 4,000 minerals that researchers know about, and so even 2 new additions is a huge deal. We don't really know what the minerals are going to be good for yet. We only have 2 small samples of them, which isn't a lot to go on. We don't know if they could help in future technology or how prevalent they are in the universe. Scientists even believe they may have a 3rd mineral identified, but they are still studying to confirm. Treasures in Chihuahua. In the Mexican state of Chihuahua, Scientists spent the last year, give or take a few months, digging holes in the desert. The holes and trenches dug by researchers were part of an effort to uncover lost ancient artifacts. Amazingly, their efforts paid off. Scientists have discovered pottery shards, pieces of stone, kernels from maize, and even shell beads from the Pacific Ocean over 250 miles away. Most of the excavations occurred south of Casas Grandes, an ancient city that thrived here 800 years ago. Casas Grandes has always been intriguing because the city was built in a desert valley. This was a place with almost no water, and yet people found a way to thrive. There was a population of at least 4,000 people in the city itself, with thousands more in long-lost settlements that have been erased by the desert over the centuries. Researchers wanted to find traces of the lost settlements. That was why they were digging holes all throughout the desert here, trying to find vestiges of the desert people who manipulated the landscape almost 1,000 years ago. The bottom line is that archaeologists now know there was a huge population here. They have found evidence of multiple occupied sites in the desert valley stretching away from Casas Grandes. What they can't understand is why so many people lived here. There appears to have been multiple periods of urbanization. In other words, people kept coming back to the desert ecosystem and rebuilding cities. They clearly had some knowledge that allowed them to live in such brutal conditions. Either that, or they were gluttons for punishment. Why do you think people kept building in this particular spot in the desert for so long? Shipwreck in the desert. In the Namibian desert, diamond miners found a ship that crashed 500 years ago on the coastline. And while the skeleton coast of Africa may be famous for its broken shipwrecks, this one was truly shocking. It contained an estimated $13 million worth of gold coins. The discovery was made on the coast in April of 2008 by the mining company De Beers. It was lost for 5 centuries because it was beneath the floor of the ocean itself. The mining site was in the surf zone, a place where the desert meets the ocean waves. It's an extremely volatile area that would be impossible to mine without modern technology. The miners built a massive seawall parallel to the beach, which formed a lagoon. They then pumped the seawater from the lagoon to make a dry space where they could mine. But when they drained the lagoon, they found the shipwreck and its amazing fortune. They didn't even need to do any mining, and they'd already found $13 million. Dr. Dieter Nolli from the Southern Africa Institute of Marine Archaeological Research said he wasn't really surprised. Portuguese sailors used to call this stretch of coastline the Gates of Hell because of how dangerous it was. This particular ship likely sank around 1535. Researchers think it was the Bom Jesus, on its way to India with 44,000 pounds of copper and a huge load of gold and ivory tusks. Lost history in Syria. There is a very strange mystery in the Syrian desert. In 2009, Robert Mason from the Royal Ontario Museum was investigating an ancient monastery when he came across some rock formations. These rock formations were obviously much older than the monastery itself, dating back an estimated 10,000 years. Mason, a seasoned archaeologist, was shocked by this revelation. He did some more digging and found even more stone formations in the nearby desert that may have been used as Neolithic animal traps. Although the region is dry today, it was much greener thousands of years ago. It was green enough that early humans would have come here to hunt animals. The monastery where Mason made these discoveries is called Der Mar Musa, and it too is full of mystery. The monastery was built around the 4th century AD, occupied until the 1800s, and then utterly decimated by earthquakes. It wasn't until the 1990s that the monastery was repaired and became active again. But Mason believes the monastery is even older and was used as a Roman watchtower to survey the desert near Damascus. Strange new species. Scientists recently discovered a new species of animal thriving in one of the hottest places on the planet. A new kind of arthropod was found living in the blistering heat of Iran's Lut Desert. It's a kind of crustacean, like a shrimp. something you would typically expect to find living in the ocean. Dr. Hussein Rajeh said finding such a creature in a hot and dry environment is sensational. The discovery was made during an ecological mission to understand the diversity of the Lut Desert. Researchers couldn't believe their eyes when they found a tiny crustacean living in the suffocating heat. It was found in a seasonal lake, a kind of oasis within the desert. But it's still extremely bizarre because the lake isn't always there. It dries up and only comes back during the wet season. And during times of drought, the lake vanishes for years at a time. And yet these crustaceans, these little itty-bitty shrimps, have managed to adapt. They can survive up to several decades in the dried sediment as they wait for rain to fill the lake basin with water. The lost lords of the Sahara. The Sahara Desert is the biggest hot desert on the planet. The deserts of Antarctica and the Arctic are technically bigger, but those are classified as cold. The Sahara is a brutal nightmare, not a place most people want to live. And yet there has been a population here for as long as civilization has been around. One of the oldest groups who call the Sahara Desert their home are the Tuaregs. They live in the desert now and have been there for thousands of years. The Tuareg get their name from the city of Targa, found in the sweltering desert of South Libya. It's not exactly clear when they started living in the desert, as our historical records really only go back so far. In the 5th century BC, Greek historian Herodotus wrote of a Libyan tribe called the Garamantes. These may have been the ancestors of the modern Tuaregs, nomads who wandered across the desert on camels. According to the Tuareg legends, their origin can be traced back to the 3rd century AD with Queen Tin Hinan. As you can see, there are a lot of discrepancies over when these people conquered the desert. Some even say they founded the city of Timbuktu in Niger in the 11th century. Old Dongola. The desert capital of Old Dongola can be found in northern Sudan. It's located on the eastern banks of the Nile River and was once home to the mighty rulers of the Kingdom of Makuria. This great kingdom rose to power in the 5th century after the Kushite Empire of Nubia collapsed. The Kushites were the ones who made some of the most breathtaking pyramids in Nubia, many of which still survive today in the ancient city of Meroe. Old Dongola reached its peak in the 10th or 11th century, around 500 years after it was founded. What began as a humble city built on the walls of a crumbling fortress soon became a major urbanized town. All around the fortress walls were small communities of desert dwellers. There were also palaces, huge churches, and a whole industry dedicated to serving the caravans that brought trading goods in and out of the region. Today, very little remains of what was a mighty kingdom that lasted longer than the original Roman Empire. Although they reached their peak by the 11th century, they continued to function as a society until the 14th century. It was only when the Arabs attacked that Old Dongola found itself in trouble. The desert city may even have survived if they hadn't been ravaged by the plague and everybody died. The Silk Road. Archaeologists in the desert wasteland between Israel and Jordan recently made an amazing discovery. A team of researchers from the Israel Antiquities Authority found traces of cotton and silk fabrics from 1,300 years ago. They believe these fabrics were imported from India and China along the Silk Road. The Silk Road was one of the greatest trading networks that ever existed. It was a road that went all the way from the farthest reaches of China to the gates of Rome. Huge parts of it stretched across deadly deserts. Merchants traveled along the network with exotic goods, dropping them off at various cities and making a huge profit. Silk textiles were particularly lucrative and made merchants wealthy during the Silk Road's 1,500 years of existence. The Silk Road even continued to function during the death of the Roman Empire, the Black Death that ravaged Europe, and the rampaging Mongol hordes. Researchers found traces of fabrics from the 7th century AD in the Arava Desert. We know many of the fabrics came from India because of the way they were designed. The designs on the fabrics look similar to wall paintings from the 6th century found in India's Ajanta caves. The fabrics were probably on their way from India to ancient Nubia, south of Egypt, when for some unknown reason they got lost in the desert. Thanks for watching! If you had to be stuck in any desert on Earth for a whole week, which one do you think you could survive in? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!